Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. I am Sam Carrico. We're still getting caught up on movie news and movies from over the summer. Listen to this. Joker 2 was officially announced. Yeah, Joker 2 is officially happening, and Lady Gaga is confirmed to be in the film opposite Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah, Lady Gaga in Joker 2. Yeah. We set somebody to try and interview Lady Gaga to reveal some details about the film, and she was tight-lipped. Yeah, believe it or not, she's actually got a pretty good poker face. Sorry. Another movie came out over the summer. This one was called Good For You, Leo Grande. Or no, it was called Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, something like that. Anyways, it's about a retired teacher. It's about a retired teacher who hires a sex worker to spice up her life because she's seeking like adventure or something like that. I don't know. I just gotta say, I'm tired of seeing the same movie over and over again about an old lady whose life has changed because she discovers a sex position that's not missionary. Gosh. Speaking of sex though, House of the Dragon has been airing, Game of Thrones spin-off, House of the Dragon. That has a lot of sex in it, right? Yeah, so one of the actors, Fabian Frankel, he was talking about how he spent 7 months rehearsing just one of the sex scenes in the show. 7 months to rehearse one sex scene. Jeez, why would you want to spend 7 months rehearsing a scene? I mean, who are you shooting this sex scene with? Oh, okay, that makes sense actually. Aquaman 2 actor Yahya Abdul-Mateen II said in a recent interview that doing superhero movies is like, quote, clown work. Yeah, he told Vulture that, quote, sometimes you gotta know which movie or genre you're in. Something like Aquaman? That's clown work, end quote. I feel like that's a little dismissive. I mean, what did the clowns do to deserve to be compared to some crap like Aquaman? Amazon Prime Video is developing a Blade Runner sequel series. Yeah, the sequel series, titled Blade Runner 2029, brought back original director Ridley Scott as an executive producer, and will presumably take place 50 years after 2017's movie Blade Runner 2049. I don't know, guys. I just feel like they're gonna make this woke. Yeah. Have it be like a meditation on societal norms and systemic injustices like slavery and what it means to be human. Bullshit! This is interesting though. Star Wars Rogue One has been taken off of Disney's release schedule. Yeah, this is the movie that was announced in 2020 with Patty Jenkins attached to direct. Jenkins later went on to direct Wonder Woman 84 and received disastrous reviews, so now Disney is having Taika Waititi direct a Star Wars movie instead. He most recently did Thor: Love and Thunder, which also received disastrous reviews, so it's a real course correction for Lucasfilm. Finally, CBS is doing some interesting marketing for season 2 of their show Ghosts. Yeah, they are showing the season premiere in movie theaters, but they're only inviting ghosts. Yeah, actual ghosts, like the undead. So if you walk by an auditorium and you see that it's an empty theater, it may not actually be. It may be full of ghosts, or at least that's what CBS says. I guess Morbius must have done the same marketing campaign. Okay, we've got a great show for you lined up. Later on, we'll be taking a look at the TikTok trend that took over theaters over the summer. But first, Cade Thomas is here to break down season 2 of Reservation Dogs. Let's get right to it. Real quick reminder about the time code feature. If you're watching this on the YouTube episode, you can use the time codes to go to whatever section of the video you want to check out first. If you're listening to the audio-only podcast, the time codes are in the show notes. So you can go to the show notes and refer to the time codes to whatever section of this episode you want to check out first. And of course, if you want to hear these discussions live, follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/thefilmfanclub. I want to introduce my guest. He is Cade Thomas. He's the host of the Double Feature Movie Club podcast, as well as Cade and Friends. You can find them both on YouTube and all your favorite podcast apps. Cade, welcome to the Film Fan Club show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been up to some new projects. I mentioned them in your intro there, but can you tell us a little bit about your two shows and what people can expect?
Yeah, Double Feature Movie Club. It's a weekly show. That's one of the ones that you mentioned. I think most sort of similar to this. With we talk to films. Typically it's movies that we missed. We hadn't ever watched them before. There are a bunch of movies that we had not watched. They're on our watch list that are from the past decade or so that just slipped through the cracks, but seemed like interesting films, and I put together a group of people. Diane is my co-host, who's on there quite a bit, and almost pretty much every week. And then typically we'll have a third person. Sometimes it's just Diane and I, but typically it's a third person. We discuss two films every week, and it's we do it live Sundays at 6 p.m. Central, and then it's later as a podcast the next day if you want to listen to it as a audio version wherever you get your podcast things. It's a fun show. It's there's nothing really probably good for the algorithm. They're not like whatever's new or whatever people just watch. So hopefully people have either watched these. Sometimes we get it really obscure with it, or sometimes we'll give good. It's a good way of getting recommendations of films, because we'll dig through just things that sound interesting to us, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but most of the time they're pretty good. So good film recommendations.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you might have booked yours truly here for an episode that we're going to record. I think October 30th was the day that we discussed. We're going to be talking about The Monster, an A24 film, and what is the other film that we're talking about? Forgive me, but it's escaping me right now.
Yes, it's Night Moves and The Monster.
So a little bit of a Halloween double feature.
Yes, yeah, I think they're darker kind of thing. I mean, Monsters, yeah, is a monster movie, and then Night Moves. I think it's some sort of. You can tell how much I remember. I think it's got Jesse Eisenberg, and I think it's some sort of dark crime kind of thing. I haven't seen it, like I say. I haven't seen any of these movies before I do, but they seem interesting. We pull them from lists of like, hey, these are movies you need to watch or whatever, and so we put together a few things and movies that I find to be interesting, and I force people to watch them so I can discuss them with them.
We are here to talk about season 2 of Reservation Dogs, but before we talk about season 2, we got to get your thoughts on season 1. You know, we talked about it last year on the Film Fan Club show. We actually had Little Mike and Funny Bone on the show, and so that was a lot of fun. Of course, I got to plug that because that was one of the highlights of my YouTube career. But so we talked about season 1. It's just so cool that there's something shot in Northeast Oklahoma, but also dovetail that with the fact that it highlights, you know, Native American, modern Native American culture through the lens and perspectives of Native American people. You know, so we've talked about it at length on this show, but I'd love to hear your perspective on season 1 and just, you know, the premise of the show in general.
Yeah, no, it's truly unique. It's a unique show. There's nothing quite like it on TV or streaming or anything like that. I mean, it's visually unique. I think that's one thing but it's also, you know, like you said, the story and the perspective is a very unique story that we haven't seen. And you have to give it a lot of credit for being one of the first wave of these new indigenous shows that's happening. Yeah, I'm a Cherokee Nation citizen, and seeing representation like that is so very important. You know, I that's one of the reasons why. I mean, my grandmother, my Cherokee grandmother, is who showed me love of film and everything. She's the one who showed me all, got me to love all this stuff, and it always bothered me that she never had someone who she could see on film that was from her culture and everything. So liven it up a little bit, that seeing this have success, you know, that was always sort of the concern that everyone always said, is like, you can make them, but it's not going to have broad appeal. And to see this have such broad appeal it's heartwarming, and it's pretty extraordinary. First season, I think it did have some sort of things to figure out, and I think that it got there in the second season. It's extremely great. First season, a lot of great little individual episodes, but I think now it's phenomenal.
I think what you're speaking to, or at least the way I read what you're saying, is, yeah, I think because we kind of talked about, or I kind of figured out the format of the show over the course of season 1. You know, they have the first couple be the big ensemble episodes, and then, like many shows that are, I don't want to say this is on a budget, but some shows that are on a budget they just highlight certain episodes. So you have like a Cheese episode and a Laura episode, and so that can, and I think in season 1 you had some really great individual episodes like you're going with, but the broader storyline, I think, was really tightened up in season 2.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, the first season, yeah, it was hard to sort of understand the point, or it's like it was at times of like, oh, I just wish we kind of got a little bit more time. Like that was my biggest complaint wasn't even like what the show did. It seemed like it was very much constrained at times by its format, by how many its episode number that it got, like its runtime. Like it seemed very much like I want more, which is not to its fault. Of course, that's really what you want your audience to say when they leave.
Right.
But I that was when I left it. It was just kind of like I just feel like it wasn't able to sort of sink its teeth enough into a lot of what it was saying and what in these characters. Like it was just like thread here, and kind of left it a little bit too much. But yeah, by the second. With this new season, it was able to sort of pull on a lot of these and really weave a lot bigger of a tapestry there that yeah, and it was and you kind of got a feel for it a little bit more. It's an ensemble show, but these four characters are your principal leads.
What I like about this show, I guess two things. What I like about this show is that it kind of does something similar to The Simpsons or Scrubs, where you really get a sense of this community and these casts of characters. Whenever I see Little Mike and Funny Bone act a certain way, I'm like, oh, of course, that would be how those characters would act when Big is put in a certain situation. It's like, oh, that's fun because that is different from how Cheese would act in that situation, and that's different from how Bear would act in that situation. You get a really strong characterization for all these characters. You get really strong characterization for all of them because of the format of the show. But going into season 2, I'd forgotten a little bit, and then whenever they started doing that, I was like, "Oh yes, I forgot." Because part of you doesn't want like the way that something like House of the Dragon, every character is in every scene, and every scene is forwarding a plot forward. You know what I mean? Whereas this show, the appeal is sitting there with these characters and spending time with them. And then once you get used to that, I think it works. And the second thing is the first show. I don't want to say it had a tonal problem. I think it just had some maybe growing pains tonally because at its heart, this is a comedy show, and it's a very funny comedy show. And it is really good in the second season, especially of getting these like bittersweet moments that do bring a tear to your eye, but not in like a traumatic, sad way, and like a heartwarming or or melancholy almost kind of way. Yeah, anything?
I 100% agree. Yes, I think the tone they nailed a lot better in the second season. That was one of my notes too. Is that it seemed the first season seemed to sort of wildly fluctuate between the sort of broad comedy versus like really trying to hit these real deep emotional beats, really dark things, and then it just kind of was a little bit harsher of a switch between these. And this one, while there was comedy elements and things, I think it rode the sort of wave that it needed to sort of reach these highs and lows a lot better. And it no point did you see like it have to do like a hard transition. It understood the show it was making by that point. And I think it had growing pains, I think, in the first season.
And we see this oftentimes. Seinfeld season 1 is not the same show as Seinfeld season 2. And what's into this show's credit, there's not really that big of a gap in quality. I don't want to say like, season 1 is bad and this is better. I just think that like what we're speaking to is the longer you do something, the better you get at it, and it's really delightful to see a show that we already liked get even better in season 2. Because I don't want to I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but oftentimes on the show I can be that. But I didn't like Obi-Wan the show, and I haven't seen She-Hulk, and I didn't see Miss Marvel, and I didn't like some of the other like a lot of the Disney Plus shows have let me down. And it's great to see like, oh, this was good and it's better, instead of being like, this is even worse.
And visually, it's really like it's so interesting and different than like at some points I'm like, oh, I kind of wish each episode was like visually distinct from each other, but at the same time, like I like that this is like color graded in like a way that I haven't seen, and it's like so sort of it keeps that sort of indie feel to it, that everything seems so grounded and interesting, like it's like almost documentary style, but still with like this color grading that's really beautiful. It's like has a lot of greens and like it has a lot of earthy tones, and I think that's intentional. That it's unlike anything else, and so that's where I'm like, I kind of like that it has its own visual palette, that you immediately know that it's in this world,
what you're
because of that.
watching. Yeah, I like that
Mhm.
as well, where you can just see a frame of the show and
Mhm.
have a good idea, like, oh, that's probably Reservation Dogs because that's what that looks like. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of two shows, and again, I'm a Debbie Downer, but like
Mhm.
two shows that attempted to do something similar and to what Reservation Dogs achieves visually. And I appreciate you bringing us back to that because that stuck with me too.
Mhm.
Two shows that try and do this and fail. One, have you been watching the Jeffrey Dahmer show that's on Netflix?
No, I did not. Yeah.
It's not for everybody. It's not for
Yeah.
everybody. I'm not going to go into a review of it here, but one specific thing is the color grading of that show is so annoying. It's like all like they put that like an earthy Instagram filter over the whole
Yes.
series, and it looks visually just repulsive to me. I mean, I get what they're trying to do because
It's
that's
trying to be kind of filmy, kind of
Yeah.
70s, right?
Which it's trying. It just looks not good. You know, I'm trying to think of another thing that looked really ugly, but well, you know, in that way, but in a different way, something that Reservation Dogs achieves is something you kind of spoke to, is that kind of indie, I mean, almost documentary kind of feel, and a lot of that's achieved through like the way the focal lengths are through the camera. And Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. I don't know if you saw Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. Visually repulsive as well. It was a not a good looking film, and it tried to do the similar kind of very sharp focus that just got to the point where it was annoying. It is wild though that, you know, this is made by Hulu. Reservation Dogs is made by Hulu, and which is owned by Disney. And Disney is the same, you know, obviously the same company that makes all the shows on Disney Plus. That just seems so soulless. And to have a show like Reservation Dogs have a lot of soul to it, a lot of artistic integrity, it seems like, a lot of a distinct visual, you know, style. I just really appreciate it. So anything else you'd like to say broadly before we get into season 2?
Yeah, I think I imagine it's probably FX that sort of allows that, because you can see some of that stuff that
I'm just boiling it down to like the very like smallest, because Disney owns FX, right?
Yes, exactly. And so I think that like perhaps that's sub within that perhaps
that's a good point,
that is like why that flies a little bit. What they allow a little I don't know exactly. I know their structure, but I imagine that there's other FX shows that look interesting.
The story shows. The I guess the show to screen, the script to screen pipeline at FX must be very different from how it is at Disney Plus.
Exactly. Yeah.
So would you recommend season 1?
Oh yeah. I'd recommend season 1. I think really it just I think the problems that we discussed is only whenever you sort of compare it to, I think the second season, which I do think is superior, but I think there's some slight growing pains. Yeah. But of course, I think it's a great show, and I think some of that struggle comes from being first and being and sort of being a trailblazer in some of this respect. You had to cut them a little bit of slack, and at the same time, it's one of the best shows and one of the best seasons of TV that's in recent years. Yeah, so it's
a great point.
Yeah,
I think it's a great point. Let's transition to season 2 now, because by talking about the cliffhanger at the end of season 1 is that they don't go to California in the way that you would expect at the end of season 1. And Laura and I always forget, Jackie is her name. Jackie, who was a member of the rival gang up until the end of the season, and Laura, you know, part of the Reservation Dogs, they join forces and go to California together. So whenever we begin season 2, as I throw up my spoiler banner that I have right here, as we begin season 2. Jackie and Alora are on their way to California, and then they run into all sorts of troubles. I really like how and if I'm leaving out anything, just throw it in whenever I toss to you at any time. But I really like the ending to episode 1 of season 2, rather. You know, the cliffhanger ending whenever they're being chased by the redneck guys. They're being chased by them. It's a fun cliffhanger ending, and then we see that followed up on the second episode, and I like it because it seems like stealing was very easy for them in the first season. So it's definitely like, everything kind of reality sets in. So what did you think of how it began the season with the first 2 episodes, the Alora and Jackie storyline?
I think that, and then the sort of really welcoming in with the ensemble cast, like I think that all that sort of it's really bringing you back into what's happening for all the characters, and you sort of see all these different characters appear in different ways. But I thought that was it's fun. It's an ensemble sort of. It brings them all there. You know, with the first season, a little didn't exactly know how they're going to handle the whole California thing. It's a thread that's through the whole thing. Is like, is the show going to sort of move there eventually at some point, or is it? And then who's going to do that, and how are they going to deal with the fact that these two are leaving? Is it going to kind of be a split show, and then sort of how they, if we're in spoilers, how they bring them back and everything. I thought that was really good. I did not know until recently, of like looking up sort of the cast and all that was Megan Mullally. Was unrecognizable as the lady the house that they go to.
But yeah, I also like Willie Jack's storyline in the first two episodes, because she believes that she's cursed the whole group, and that's kind of heartwarming, but also sad. Anything to say about Willie Jack's storyline? And I think, I can't remember the episode that it happens in, but I like the lifting the curse with the free falling. I think that was good too.
Yeah, yes. Willie Jack's my favorite character in the show. I love that performance. That performance is like just great. It never. I mean, like in that actress, what Paulina, Alexis.
Paulina,
she's so. I mean, wow. I mean, that is. Just so believable in and be able to hit the sort of comedy elements and to hit the dramatic elements so well that we sort of get later in the show. But just she could so much of acting is reacting too, and boy, is she great, just amazing at that. So many different memes come out of that, and she's so great. Yeah.
I remember, there are so many memes with her character in the first season, and then I think what you're talking about is a good point too. Is I don't want to say her performance is understated, because that almost feels like I'm underselling it, but she doesn't have, to my knowledge, like a bunch of big monologues or big crying scenes. Obviously, she cries at points through the series, but a lot of it is, like you're saying, just the way that she delivers her lines in conversation, the way that she reacts to certain things when the character chooses not to say. And how, and just dealing, like we're talking about in these first two episodes, dealing with the curse, you can tell she cares about her friends. It's very wholesome. I like the performance too.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. I agree that they have an understanding of each of these characters' perspectives really well, and their voice and everything, and a lot of that's of course performance, but a lot of that comes in the writing too, and knowing sort of what they can play up and everything, and like when they hand stuff to her, she knocks it out of the park every single time. That's just a fabulous performance, fabulous character.
Another storyline that I like, though, and like I said, feel free to throw in anything that I'm missing here, but I think the next two episodes, over the course of the next two episodes, Bear gets his job. We meet Dogface, who was a TikTok sensation back in 2021 or 2020, somewhere around there. He has a recurring role on the show. He works with Bear, but I believe he's also Cheese's uncle. Is that?
Yes.
True?
Yeah.
And then what I like is one episode that also I believe has the podcasting and comedian guy Mark Maron. He's on the episode plot of this episode that I really liked is Cheese is his Dogface, his uncle is raided by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol or something like that, and has to go to jail. So Cheese is put in child services or something like that, and his guardian is Mark Maron, and we meet. It's very much kind of an individual episode, because I think the rest of the Res Dogs only are in one scene, and it's all like a character study on Cheese, and you get to meet the other characters at this group home. And I think that was a standout episode. But anything that you'd like to mention about Bear's working storyline, or Cheese and his uncle's relationship, Dogface's performance, but also I really like that one episode.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, because like you say, you kind of don't know. I mean, I had to be like, okay, I don't. It had been so long ago that I would watch the first season. It's like some of these things of like, I didn't know if some of the stuff had been set up, because then we sort of know that the lady at the IHS front desk lady is Jackie's aunt, and it's like, had that been set up before? And I didn't remember if that was, and then like, so it's like, it's almost, you have to have like a string board to sort of understand how these, which I mean, it makes sense with them. It's a small community, and of course they have community of just how that, they're all, aunties and uncles to each other and everything.
Yeah.
And it's just, and so that was fascinating, because like, I'm like, oh, okay, so that's news. Because it had been set up where he of course worked at the roofing, but then he was Cheese's uncle. I find that all very fast, as someone who I love interwoven sort of stories and how everything's connected. I love that. I love interesting relationships and in films, and so that's the fact that it's all sort of connected in interesting sort of ways, and you sort of watch that. I find that very fascinating and very interesting way to sort of watch. And you can just tell in like the writer's room of like when they're planning this whole season of like having to be like, okay, we can put this over here and this can kind of be a thread over here, and if this character can be in this episode in this sort of way, like it's, and then kind of it'd be flipped and they're connected to this other character in this interesting way. That's very fascinating, and I find that sort of thing very fascinating. Yeah, I liked what they each, of course, have like an episode. I mean, if not more. I mean, they have multiple things throughout it, but each of them have like an episode that's theirs to sort of go on a journey. And I find that, that they did each of them very well. And Mark Maron, interesting character of like being he was kind of an antagonist, but then it's like I don't know, that was an interesting sort of thing. He was very mean.
I got the sense that he had like a heart of gold, though, right?
It's sort of
everyone in the show is so awkward sometimes and so off-putting, and that's part of the comedy. And I love awkward comedy, but that was definitely part of his character as well.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating one of like, some of them get like more. Especially, he's a comedian. Like that's what he's sort of, known for and everything. And, you think back to like Bill Burr in the first, season, and he gets sort of some comedy things. And Mark Maron certainly has somebody. It's like there's a little bit more downbeat of a comedy that he has to sort of play. It's kind of an interesting kind of, it's more situational kind of, and it's a different kind of character. But yeah. My favorite thread that just goes through it out is like every single person that these people interact with have some sort of story of how natives impacted them, or just that they can't escape this from like just anybody just constantly has to bring this up to them, and it's in some sort of way. That is my favorite thing. That's just a complete stranger that you meet has to have some sort of saying about that. It's very accurate.
Another episode that I liked is I don't know if I mentioned it before or we started streaming or during the stream, but we mentioned that Deverly Jacobs is also a member of the writers' room this season. She plays Laura, and I was wondering how her episodes would go. And the episode Maybell, I believe it's called. It's the episode with Alora's. I think we established it's Alora's grandmother is dying, and everybody in the community gathers around, break bread together and say goodbye to her. And it was kind of also the midpoint of the season, I want to say, because it was kind of whenever Jackie as a character was being brought into the group, because eventually Laura and Jackie make it back to Oklahoma because they never really leave Oklahoma. They make it back to the res, and the rest of the reservation dogs are skeptical of Jackie, but Jackie is kind of brought more into the fold in this episode. I was curious about how Deverly Jacobs writing her episodes that she wrote would be, but this was one of my favorite episodes. It kind of nails that balance of heart but also comedy. And we were talking about earlier before we, as we were being a little bit more aloof before we got into spoilers, is this is one of those things where it's a very serious subject matter, but it's not as dour or an abrupt shift as maybe certain scenes may have felt in the previous season.
I like their ability to tie in these traditional aspects that, but without making them like that it means something to native audiences and everything, but it's not completely lost on a general audience. Like they can they do such a great job with that and introducing and having them in the various ways of, the idea of this community coming around in death and that being and touching upon things that anyone can sort of understand and get. That happens in a lot of cultures, but of course, having the medicine men there singing in their language is, something that's very much of the Muskogee culture, and of course, a lot of different native cultures as well. And just the idea of, that they're this close knit community, and that it was it was a very powerful episode, and specifically from this character that is going through a lot of internal things. Having lost her mother, having lost Daniel, it's now to lose sort of the only real other person outside of her friends that she had, and I think that was a powerful. I mean, it made sense for that character, but it still was. Yeah, I thought that and the sort of spirit, that little button at the end was really good with losing of the grandparent in that sort of way. I think that was one of those that I think real big highlights of just from even that character's perspective of like the sort of thread that she would sort of run out of these moments because she felt like she had to deal with these sort of losses on her own. It's a thread that's throughout the whole show, and like she feels like she has to isolate herself and get out from these sort of moments because I don't know, I think that's sort of one of those character beats and one of those character things, and that was a very, very powerful thing. And I love the aspect ratio shift to kind of the spirit world and the fog or whatever. Yeah, they do good with that stuff.
Light Horse Policeman Big, what did you think of his acid trip in episode 8? And then what did you think of Lily Gladstone, Killers of the Flower Moon fame, future Killers of the Flower Moon fame? Lily Gladstone has a guest appearance in episode 9. Very different episodes, but briefly before we jump into the finale, what did you think of episodes 8 and 9 and their performances?
Yeah, no, I love. I would have to say probably my second favorite character is Officer Big and all that, and it like getting. I'm like, oh, if we're gonna get like a little X-Files type episode with him as like the lead, that's what I want, and that is sort of what we get. But I love that character, and I want just a whole show with that. I do think at times they're constrained by having to be like a half-hour show. That's still
that one could have been longer. Yeah,
it's still my complaint in general about the show is like I do wish that these were an hour long or 40 whatever, the 45 or whatever they are really, which would, I think it would give it a little bit more time to breathe and it would feel less situational comedy sort of about it, which I think that they're moving away from that sort. I mean, they're still, each episode has like a premise and a little thing that they're poking fun at or whatever, but a situation. But I do think that it's kind of being the fact that it's an ensemble and they have to do a lot of things. I think it does something in your head that sort of makes it more like this is a prestige show or whatever. This is a different format because we are so used to sort of these different formats, and it still being a half hour seems a little bit like, makes it seem a little bit disposable within, like, I think your subconscious. It's just me saying that, but yeah. So I do wish these were a little longer. But yes, I love Officer Big and that whole thing. I thought that was great. Briefly, I did want to say I love the decolonization episode. That's one of my favorite ones with the young elders. I thought that was incredibly hilarious. And
that was the lead of Prey was in that film or in that episode, and she did a really good job. It was a very different role from Prey.
Yeah, and just that whole just so many lines in that, and the fact that they're there for this Sonic gift card, and the fact that, just the fact that they're all the interpersonal things, like in the Willie Jack and Jackie sort of thing comes to a head.
Oh, that was a great bonding episode for them. I love that.
And I thought, that to me is one of those interesting stuff. Dinosaur Nation, all that just sort of stuff that came out of that. I thought that was one of the standouts to me of. It was just a little, it was like that one was more of a sitcom style kind of thing. Not to, it didn't have punchlines or it wasn't like a laugh track or whatever, but
it was one episode storyline.
It was contained. Yeah. In general, I love just the IHS stuff, even from the first season. Anything that's there is just I love all that. And even the conference was a great episode with all the moms there. Yeah,
that was a good one. The aunties go crazy. That was fun. Briefly, I also like obviously the Officer Big episode, but the Lily Gladstone's appearance in that episode introduces kind of the 2-episode arc of Daniel's letter, and a lot of the episode is obviously we get the setup, and once she gets to the prison to meet Lily Gladstone's character, a lot of them is just them talking, and that's a big plot propellant for the show in that episode. And it's just that, whenever you're just relying on two performances from two actors, it can either make or break an episode or a movie or whatever it may be. And this got me really excited to see Killers of the Flower Moon, because I thought Lily Gladstone did a great job in her episode that she appears in.
Yes, no, and Aaron talks about that shot of like the ancestors and all that, and that in that episode.
That was good, yeah.
Like, and just technically it's great, but also, of course, I think it means a lot to a lot of people emotionally. But from a technical perspective, that's also was a pretty cool accomplishment of how they did that in such an interesting way. But yeah, it very impactful, and that performance again, Willie Jack, like that is there's no punchline there. Of course, like most of her stuff is a comedy thing, but she can nail that dramatic stuff. I think this is a standout performance of the whole show. It's amazing, and I would love to see her in more things. It's a truly great performance.
Yeah, she's at the beginning of, I think, a really, if there is justice in the world, a very long and varied career. Because like you said, she's good at all the comedy stuff. We talked about her reacting a lot in scenes and being subtle with her performance. This is probably her big time to shine. If it was, I always say, if this actor was going to submit for an Emmy, it would be this episode in her case, I think.
Yes.
And like I said, Lily Gladstone is good. This brings us to the finale. They finally go to California. I was surprised by how fast because it's like a built up. It's kind of like in Game of Thrones, not in Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, they're not that they're similar, but in Game of Thrones they build up. The sacking of King's Landing. Like, is Daenerys going to attack? Is it not? Let's wait for 3 seasons, and then when she does it, it takes like an episode. And I'm like, well, we built this up for anyway. It's not that it's bad. I just thought it was a funny parallel.
Yes.
We build up going to California for 2 seasons, and they make it there in 1 episode. But I think they wanted to focus on the fact that things don't go as they plan. And before we talk about the ending to the episode, what did you just kind of think of our season finale?
Yeah, and I think you're bringing up sort of another thing that's like a lot of stuff happens in between. You're not like that, because I still think that they are constrained by the half hour, and I don't know if that's if it's like a thing that they have to. It's mandated at this point. You can't probably change formats in the halfway through your show, but I do think that it at times it does seem like they have to jump right into the premise right away of the episode, and like that. So some things just have to be wrapped up and done so we can get on to the next sort of thing. I think an example of that was sort of Willie Jack and Jackie's with the decolonization, where they were like kind of still they ended the episode where like they could have made amends, but then they didn't. And in the very next episode, they kind of just make amends on the cheese episode. So it's like stuff like that where they have to quickly get over hurdles in order for that episode's plot to jump in. I think that's something where it had been built up for a long time about this California thing. They immediately have to be like, okay, we're doing this.
We're there.
We're there. And it's to get to the point of the episode, because they only have a amount of time that they have to do that. But every time, whenever it's a barrier that you had to get across for, I think, good storytelling. Like every time it's like, okay, here's what's happening, and we're in this moment now. Yeah. And I think once they're there, it makes sense, and it's beautiful. Very little comedy in that finale, but that didn't bother me at all. I thought that
they had earned it by that point.
Yes, exactly. And I think that of course, the comedy is what a lot of people talk about. It's what gets the sort of buzz, and it gets the little shares and everything, and what people talk about. But I think what people actually truly enjoy is these characters and these moments and being with them, and it being so true. And and by that end, that's an amazing finale, and it really does it really strikes a great emotional, like it really hits you in a way.
I believe this is the episode where we get the payoff of reading Daniel's letter, right? It's introduced throughout all of the last episode, and we don't really read it hear it until this episode. And then so that having that through line, and then them doing the thing, and then Laura's hesitance, and then them being on the beach together, and then holding each other. What I like is just the showing just good friends, having a level of intimacy that's not sexual, obviously, is also it's nice because you don't see that a lot in another very random example, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. That Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso, they're very intimate in that film, but they don't have a relationship. They're not sexual or anything. It's just good pals being pals, and that's wholesome. I like that a lot. And then, so I like the finale, like you're talking about, fantastic finale, and then whenever they cut to Daniel being there. Other shows or lesser films could have had that been very hokey, but it was all just done with a level of care and a delicacy that I think it worked for me. I loved that finale. What would you like to say about that last scene?
And I mean, it's like they're obviously in the ocean, and like the camera of all, like it feels so like tangible and real, like that, like you just don't see. I don't know, like it's good so point. Like, I mean, like it's so raw, and like the wind and the it's like typically they'd have to have it all shot right, and everyone had to be look right, and the lighting has to be all camera locked, and it's this. Or
not to interrupt you, but what they would do nowadays is be on a soundstage with a circular wall that has a screen on it. Are you familiar with this? The way they shot the Mandalorian. Yeah, the volume. The way they shot the Mandalorian and the way they're shooting House of the Dragon, a show that I like for the most part. They're shooting with this volume thing, and just compare any scene shot with volume, compare it to this last scene in Reservation Dogs, and you can tell why it makes sense to go on location.
Yeah, and it's like lighting, like I don't ever really. This show seems to use mostly like natural lighting, and like in it and you can just sort of I just like that better. It's just it seems so much
takes
more
work though.
Yes, it does.
It takes work, and you can't just slide it like the way that everything's done at Disney Plus. I imagine is everything's just like on almost like a conveyor belt. You just move the actors in, they shoot their scene. Okay, you're done with a Mandalorian episode. Move the actors in. Now you're doing an Obi-Wan episode.
Done beforehand. All the programming of what the background and all that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
hate that.
And it's so dramatically different than what you're getting elsewhere, and it's like even other shows that are like intimate, people, it's like they don't kind of put them in these interesting sort of ways, and I still think that it's somewhat different in that way. That I love it. I think that it makes it so sort of real, and like these characters are really there, and that they're not they kind of dress people down, they make them realistic, and they like it's different, and it's unique, and it's a singular, it's a group of people, but it's a perspective that we don't get to see.
I love that. I think we've been heaping a lot of praise on this show. Let's look ahead to season 3. This show has been renewed for a third season, which was obviously great to see, and it was renewed ahead of this finale, and a good thing too, because this finale ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. So if I didn't know there was a third season coming, I wouldn't know what to think. I'd be confused. So because at the end, Bear says, "I'm not going back."
Yeah.
What did you think of that cliffhanger?
I hesitate to sort of any of these shows to really have it on my mind for a year and a half or whatever long it's going to be. But because it could be in the very first episode, whatever, and we just move back or whatever.
That's what they did. Yeah, that's what they did with Allura and Jackie.
Exactly.
So I would be a little annoyed if they do the same cliffhanger with a different character again, and then undo it again.
But like, what's the other option? Are they going to have half of them go back, or are they going to move the show to LA? I mean, like, I don't.
In season 2 of Glee, I love all my comparisons. In season 2 of Glee, Kurt, the character Kurt, went to Dalton Academy. He left McKinley and went to Dalton Academy. So what they did was just cut between McKinley and Dalton for the Kurt scenes. And I'm like, you could do that with Bear theoretically.
Yeah, or him and another, like they split the group, like half of them, 2 of them stay, and half of them, or the other 2 go back. It is very positive, because I do think one thing that a lot of people have said, and I agree with, we really focus in on, reservation, but like we don't really focus on urban natives a lot, and sort of that being that perspective of it's a completely different sort of perspective, and I think that is something that would be, seeing it from this sort of perspective would be very fascinating, and seeing a character sort of go through this idea of being away from their home and still trying to connect with their culture, but not having or being around other people of that would be a fascinating sort of thing to dissect. And it could be a whole sort of like, really these shows take, I mean, like the seasons take place over what, like, I mean, of course you get flashbacks and stuff, but the actual month, 2 months.
The meat of it is just a very short amount of time.
And so, I mean, you could have like a half of a season or first part of the third season taking place in LA as they're trying to like figure it out or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they still have a week of spring break. They were there on the,
Oh, is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah, they went on spring break and they still had a bit of their school. I mean, they're seniors and they're on the spring break is the sort of premise there. And so,
yeah,
I mean, you could do a season that's half there and then like they go back and they finish out the year and then they try to figure, I mean, like, yeah, they're I'm sure they're trying to figure out how to do that. I do they could go back and with the idea of eventually going back. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities there. And if and they could have half of them stay and half of them go back. Yeah, I do think that there's.
I think that those two are good options. I think what I would like to see happen is either they split the show for a little while and have Bear and maybe a +1 or 2, Bear and Laura or something like that, or just Bear and as he meets new people, have him go and split the show a little bit, or like you also hinted at, do maybe a 3-episode arc of getting back there and back again, kind of not all these. I love all these different references. There and back again. So I'd love it if they did
then Desolation of Smog.
And then they'll have the Battle of the 500. Yeah, anyways, but my least favorite option is if I think they got away with it in this episode. Well, they did a 2-episode arc, so that's fine. So I guess it was okay. But I was a little annoyed by the Allura and Jackie don't even make it out of Oklahoma and reset. I don't like it when characters are reset because you didn't know what to do with the development that you made.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you could. I think having sort of a beginning part that sort of, and then the transition, or like, and then, or they split and they kind of split the narrative by the end, and then I think there's a way to do that. I think that things have to sort of have consequences, or it's going to become a little bit stale. That's always the case of when things don't have these sort of consequences ongoing. Like the most lasting consequences happen before the show started, and so you need some things that kind of have some as the show goes on. I think they're all in interesting different places, and it is interesting to see that Bear is the one that wants to stay, and I do think that makes sense of like he has the least amount of like plot threads back home. And so that to me makes the most sense to have him be the one there, that the others don't. Like, I mean, with Allura, she has this house that's hers, and like and Jackie's back there. I found it bizarre. I thought Jackie was going to go with them, but then it made sense. It was
I guess well they knew Daniel, but when he died, then that was their thing. So
it was their thing. Yeah,
but I just felt like it was a little exclusionary. Like I know we became friends over the course of the season, but bye. And then she
stole the car with them. Like, but then they were like, okay, see ya. Yeah.
That was a little convenient. Just a very minor nitpick, but I did at the beginning of the episode, seeing them all do a heist together.
Yes.
and fail, but then succeed because he gives them the car. That was a cute touch. But and that ties in with the acid trip he had in the previous episode. So I like that it's all connected. But yeah, it's weird that Jackie's like they're fully part of the group now, helping them do heists, and then it's like, all right, see ya. It's like in Star Wars Episode 9, whenever Rose was a big part of Episode 8, and then everybody hated her. And then they like, all right, see you, Rose. Are you sure you don't want to come? She's like, oh, I'm not going to come. It's like, okay.
I'm going to react to CGI Carrie Fisher.
Oh my gosh. Episode October 30th, guys. I will be talking about Star Wars in detail on my YouTube channel. Cade, we made it to the end of the season. We've talked about season 2 of Reservation Dogs. I appreciate you taking this journey with me. I think it's been a good discussion. Can you remind us where people can find everything that you do online?
Yes, well, you can follow me on Instagram's where I post most of my stuff that I have. There is a Facebook page as well, but where you can follow what I'm making a little bit better with everything, and that's at the Cade Thomas. But you can also find me on YouTube. That's where actually all the content is housed, youtube.com/Cade Thomas, and it has my Cade and Friends, Double Feature Movie Club, any other little random videos. If I do films and stuff, I'll put them out there and stuff. You can find my archives of, you can watch Ribbon, Laura, if you're interested in true crime. Laura's on there. All my stuff is there and available. Let's Do Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast platform. Wherever you listen to
Sundays
podcasts.
is the live stream of Double Feature Movie Club. Monday is the podcast version of Double Feature Movie Club. And I believe Wednesday is every other Wednesday is Cade and Friends.
Yes, every other Wednesday is Cade and Friends. And yep, like you said it perfectly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And finally, the kids are all right. The second Minions movie, The Rise of Gru, was released on July 1st, 2022. Now, I'm no Minions fan, so I didn't pay much attention when the movie was coming out. What did catch my eye, though, was the enthusiasm expressed when it came out. But not by who you'd expect. No, believe it or not, I didn't see any wine moms rushing out to see Minions with their 4-year-olds. What I did see, though, were teenage boys posting on TikTok that they were rushing out to see Minions, wearing the best suits they owned. This trend was called Gentleminions, and apparently it started in Australia. The Gentleminions trend involved the aforementioned dressing up and seeing minions, but also recreating Gru's signature pose, and perhaps sneaking in some bananas, all while bonding with your friends and posting about it online. Rowdy kids having a good time, though? We can't have that. The woke scolds on Twitter were immediately deployed to write online about how awful these kids were being. Here's one of several similar tweets I found. Quote, "I hope everyone who came to see Minions in suits, DIES. You're not funny. I hope you all had the worst journey home, CUNTS." End quote. Keep in mind, this was posted in response to popcorn on the ground at a kids movie. Sir or ma'am, there's a very high likelihood that the popcorn was left there by an actual toddler. This tends to happen at kids' movies. Secondly, I'm sorry that you had to do your job for 5 whole minutes. I mean, my gosh, I used to work at a movie theater, and one of my favorite parts of my shift was when I could spend 20 minutes with my headphones in, just mindlessly sweeping the floors of an auditorium. Of course, smushing a banana into the floor or wall of an auditorium is too far, but just leaving popcorn or a banana on the ground? I mean, have you ever heard of the Rocky Horror Picture Show? The cult classic has been playing in theaters consistently since 1975, largely in part to its audience participation. Theatergoers are encouraged to spray water guns, throw rice, confetti, and toilet paper, and use noisemakers during the show. Yes, someone has to clean that up too, but that's part of the fun. If you can recognize that with something like Rocky Horror, but not Minions, you may be a hypocrite. Okay, that's our show. I'd like to send a special thank you to Cade Thomas for joining me this week. Keep in mind, I will be on Cade's show, the Double Feature Movie Club podcast, on October 30th. You can get that wherever you get your podcasts. I've been Sam Carrico. Thanks so much for checking this video out, guys, and I'll see you next week.